Record. Okay. So, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our first ever meeting of this subject, no? CEC1, Risk, Disaster, and Humanitarian Communication. So anyway, for those of you na wala nakaila sa ko, I am your professor for this subject for the whole semester. I am Sherry Lorraine, Corsiga-Sanayan, registered criminologist. So I hope na we all get along and magkasinabtanay tayo, magtinabangay lang punta. Because whatever you are experiencing right now, technicalities, internet problems, I am also experiencing that one. Magsinabtanay lang ta. So anyway, let's go to the topic. So let's go to the concept of disaster and disaster risk, anatomy of disasters, the evolution and risk analysis, hazard and vulnerability. Okay, so let's go first to the concept of disaster and disaster risk. Unsa di kaalahian sa disaster and disaster risk? So first, let's go to the concept of disaster. Now, when an earthquake, no matter how large or small, occurs and has no immediate impact on human lives or assets because the region where it happened is not populated by people, it is classified as natural phenomenon. But if the earthquake causes the collapse of buildings, damages critical facilities, and generates a tsunami or initiates a landslide, it impacts on humans, their resources or investments, and the environment. This earthquake is classified as a natural hazard. Unsay but pasabot ana? Unsay kalahian day aning natural phenomenon and natural hazard. Okay, it is said that it is said that kapag ang earthquake nahitabo sa isa ka uninhabited place, when you say uninhabited place, walay ni puyo nga bisan isa ka tao, walay mga building, walay mga structures just like this one sa disyerto or sa isa ka sa deserted area, diha nahitabo ang earthquake and naay damage diha, ang tawag ana is natural phenomenon. Because why? Because earthquake was caused by nature. So therefore it is a natural phenomenon. Right? When you say phenomenon, pangyayari. Okay, pangyayari. Natural na pangyayari dito sa mundo. Earthquake. Natural phenomenon. But when the earthquake happens in a inhabited area, just like this one, just like these two photos here nga na ay building nga nahugmak, na ay mga gipang rescue kay nangaipit sa building nga natumba or nabungkag because of the intensity of the earthquake, ang tawag ana is natural hazard. Why? Nganong nailisan man siya nga same lang man siya cause, ma'am? Because gitawag siya hazard, gitawag siya natural hazard because first, natural meaning the earthquake was caused by the nature, di ba? Now hazard because it causes destruction, it gives fear, it affects the investments and ano pa to? Investment and resources of the people. Aside from that, it causes the collapse of buildings, it damages the critical facilities and many more. Diba daghan kaayo siya og natamaan, daghan kay siya naigo. That is why gitawag siya hazard. When you say hazard, delikado, it risks your lives. It risks your properties, yung iniingat-ingatan mong mga investments, mga buildings, your businesses, your business establishments, even your vehicles, kung natumbahan na sa isa ka punuan kay tungod naglinog, di ba? Natumbahan sa poste kay naglinog, natumbahan og mangga ang inyong balay kay tungod naglinog, na landslide kay tungod naglinog. That is what we call natural hazard. Unsay kalahian nila? Pag walay tao ang isa ka area, ang tawag ana is natural phenomenon, di ba? Pag naa ganina nasakitan, na ay naguba nga building, na ay naguba nga mga properties, na ay risk sa kinabuhi sa tao, ang tawag na is natural hazard. Okay? So ayaw mo og libog sa duha. Nasabtan unsay kalahian sa natural phenomenon and natural hazard?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Yes,
very
ma'am.
good. Okay, very good. Now let's go to disaster. Disaster is a serious disruption of the functioning of a society, causing widespread human, material, or environmental losses which exceed the ability of the affected society to cope using only its own resources. Mauna siya ang disaster. When you say disaster, pagkabungkag, disruption, pagkabungkag, pagka-damage, that is also a disruption or serious disruption of functioning of the society. Just like for example, na ay dito sa for example sa Maguindanao na ay gera dito. That is a disaster because it disrupts the functioning of the society. No? Nabungkag nila ang natural function or normal function sa society, which is ang manginabuhi og tarong. Mag-adto sa eskwelahan or sa trabaho without having worries, without worrying nga maigo ba sila og ligaw na bala, malandingan ba sila og ba, bomba sa ilahang gitrabahuan, di ba? Madamay ba sila sa gera? That is the serious disruption of functioning of a society. Di ba? Aside from that, it also causes the widespread human, material, and environmental losses. Right? Kapag gera. Ano naman, maigo na ang tanan maigo, whether it is a building, it is establishment, whether it is a school, whether it is a billboard or whatsoever. Diba? Samot na nga kung ikaw naa ka sa within the area, tapos dili ka mo tago, no, there's a big possibility nga madamay kag maigo ka sa ligaw na bala, right? That is one of the example of disaster. Diba? Also, another meaning by Carter, it is an event, natural or man-made, sudden or progressive, which impacts with such severity that the affected community has to respond by taking exceptional measures. Right? So katong ganina, gihatag daw example sa inyo ganina nga gera, that is man-made disaster. Now, what is the example of natural disaster? This pandemic is a disaster. It is a natural disaster. Why? It affects our functioning as a society. No, it has a serious disruption of the functioning of the society. Ma'am, how come nga na-disrupt? Wala may kuan. Why? Wala day nangamatay tungod aning pandemic? Diba? We have to take an exemptional measures. We need to wear face mask, face shield, even a PPE para lang maprotektahan nato tong sarili against the virus. Diba? We have to go exemptional measures. We have to take exemptional measures nga to the point mo accept tag whatever kind of vaccine ang ihatag sa tua. Regardless of the brand. Regardless of the brand of the vaccine. As long as ma-vaccine na nata. Because we need to boost our immune system to fight against this virus. And this kind of viruses actually, because we have different varieties or variations of viruses. Diba? Coronavirus. We have Delta virus. And as far as I know, Delta virus is much more stronger and much more fatal than the previous coronaviruses. Diba? So one of our representative in health department, or one of the representative or one of the health representative sa ato ang government, they keep on, or he keep on telling us, no, telling everybody through social media, through television, through radio, that the adults need to be vaccinated in order for them not just to protect themselves but also to protect the children, because the children, no, the 12 years old and below are not qualified or not allowed to have a vaccination against COVID, right? So that is why mo nang ginaingon nila nga magpa-vaccine mo, not just because you protect yourself, not just because you wanted to protect yourself or your loved ones inside the house, but also you want to protect the children, because wala sila protection, wala sila boosters para sa ilang immune system to fight and to protect themselves um against this pandemic. No, so therefore this pandemic is also a disaster. Diba? It has a severity of affection of the community. Aside from that, we need to take exemptional measures. Another meaning of disaster is it is an event which deprives people of life, property, or livelihood, and which taxes the resources of the survivors beyond their collective capacity to cope. Now, let's connect it to our new normal, to this pandemic. Diba? Katong time nga nag-lockdown, that we are not allowed to go out our house, no, our houses, our homes, we have the deprivation. We have the deprivation of life. As well as we exercise the preservation of life also. Ma'am, how come nga na-deprive ta sa to ang life? Na-deprive ta sa tong life in the sense that we cannot go out and do the normal thing that we do in our daily lives. Dili ta pwede mo gawas sa balay para makipag-meet sa atong mga friends. Dili ta pwede mo gawas sa tong balay para mo attend og mga social gatherings. Dili ta pwede mo gawas sa balay because we want to go shopping, we want to go to the park, no? 'Di ba? The only people that needs to go out and are allowed to go out are these people nga mulihok sa essential goods nato. Sila mo palit sa mga essential materials, essential necessities. Right? Now that is a deprivation of life. Aside from that, ang preservation of life is the mere fact that the government does not allow us to go out of our homes. That is also for us to be protected against the virus. When we are inside our home, kung naala nagpuyo lang ta sa tong balay, walay virus nga makasulod. Because kinsa day magdala og virus. Ato kita lang gyapon mga sarili nato, right? Nung anong niabot ta sa inani nga sa inani nga tuig. 'Di ba? Because we apply all of this, because we apply the exemptional measures in order for us to preserve our lives, right? Now, aside from that, deprives the property or livelihood. 'Di ba? Pag lockdown na to, wala na nakatrabaho ang uban tao. 'Di ba? Na nag-expire na ilang contract, wala sila gidadawat ka sahod kay wala sila katrabaho. Diba? Mauna siya. And ang gigamit sa government in order for us nga mahatagan og mga ayuda is the taxes coming from the survivors. Who are the survivors? We are also. Diba? Mauna siya. So that is the meaning of disaster. Now, let's go to disaster as the consequences of natural hazards. Okay, take note, the natural hazard is katong mga hazards or mga phenomenon that causes the life and risk the lives of the people. Okay, let's go to hazard, vulnerability, and disaster risk. H stands for hazard. No, when you say hazard, it is a dangerous phenomenon, substance, human activity, or condition that may cause loss of life, injury, or other health impacts, property damage, loss of livelihood and services, social and economic disruption, or environmental damage. That is according to Republic Act number 10121. No, that is the meaning of hazard. Okay, that is meaning when you say hazard, it is a dangerous phenomenon that may cause the loss of life, injury, and other health impacts. Ang vulnerability naman stands for letter V. It is the extent to which community structure, services, or environment are likely to be damaged or disrupted by the impact of the hazard. Unsa ka vulnerable ang ato ang Pilipinas o base sa data nga atong natala, di ba? Ato ang na encode. Na unsa ka vulnerable ang Pilipinas against COVID? Di ba? Are we really ready to face this pandemic? No? Pero ready or not, naa man gyud ang pandemic, niabot na man gyud siya, di man siya mapugnan. Risk analysis, it is the systematic identification, evaluation, and assessment of risk objects and hazards. Disaster risk, the potential disaster losses in lives, health status, livelihood assets, and services which could occur to a particular community or a society over some specified future time period. That is according to RA 1012-1. So that is the meaning of hazard, vulnerability, and disaster risk. Now, what is the meaning of DRA? DRA stands for Disaster Risk Assessment. It is a methodology to determine the nature and extent of risk by analyzing potential hazards and evaluating existing conditions of vulnerability that together could potentially harm exposed people, property, services, livelihood, and the environment of which they depend. This is also according to RA 1012-1. So that is disaster risk assessment. You assess the potential risk or potential hazard by evaluating the existing condition of vulnerability of the society, of the specific building, or unsa tong direct nga matamaan sa risk. Diba? I-analyze nimo na. Para in order for you to determine what are the proper measures or proper steps to do. Diba? The proper steps to take in order for you to help and control the situation. Ang DRR naman, or disaster risk reduction, the concept and practice of reducing disaster risk through systematic systematic efforts to analyze and manage the causal factors of disasters, including through reduced exposures to hazards, lessen vulnerability of people and property, wise management of land and the environment, and improve preparedness for adverse events. Now, for example, unsa man ang ato ang DRR during pandemic under this new normal? In order for us to reduce the risk of nga ma-infect ka sa virus is we need to take exemptional measures. You need to bring with you an alcohol or a wipes every time you go out of your houses. You need to wear face mask, face shield to whenever you go out or to go somewhere. No? Always stay away at least 3 to 5 feet away from other people in order for you to make sure that you are protected. Diba? That you're not going to get infection against other people because wala ka kabalo kung kinsay infected or kinsay wala. Right? So that way, that is the disaster risk reduction. That way you can control the number of infection rate of COVID viruses. Okay, exposure stands for letter E, coping capacity stands for letter C, or components of vulnerability. But in most models, they are treated separately. In this case, risk in terms of disaster risk assessment or DRA as may be stated, this is the formula. Okay. R stands for risk, H stands for hazard, E stands for exposure, and V stands for vulnerability, and C stands for coping capacity. Okay. Now, the working formula for disaster risk assessment or DRA as a basis for disaster risk reduction. So that is how they formulate their plan, how they assess the hazard or the risk. Okay. So again, exposure is the number of people, property, systems, or other elements present in hazard zones that are thereby subject to potential losses. Sino ang exposure dito? Ang mga tao, when it comes to coronavirus. Coping capacity is the ability of people, organizations, and systems using available skills and resources to face and manage adverse conditions, emergencies, or disasters. So what is the coping capacity of the Filipino people when it comes to coronavirus, when it comes to this pandemic? With the help of the vaccines, di ba, nakita nato nga mas paspas ang recovery period sa mga tao nga na-infect or natakdan og COVID because they were vaccinated. Diba? But there are other allegations that people die because of the vaccination. Diba? Pero it is an ongoing investigation pa naman yan. Right? Na compared to the people nga na-infect, nga wala na vaksinan, ang mga symptoms nila were times 3, times 5, or times 10 compared to the people nga na-infect sa COVID pero na-vaksinan. Mild lang ang ilang symptoms. That is the help or the purpose of the vaccines. Again, the vaccines are not medicines. Okay? That the vaccines are just your immune boosters. Immunity boosters nga gi-introduce sa lawas. Ang vaccine is gi-introduce niya ang COVID virus sa atong lawas in order for our body nga dili na makalitan sa COVID, in order for our body nga kabalo na sila unsaon pag-fight, pag-treat ug pag-kill sa virus kapag naana sa atong sulod sa lawas. So therefore, kining vaccines nato is mao ni siya ang coronavirus actually. That is the virus. Pero gipahina lang na siya. Okay? Gipahina lang na siya. These are the coronaviruses nga gipa-weaken in a weakened state. 'Di ba? Para enough sa atong lawas nga mapatay niya ang coronavirus. Okay? So once nga mapatay na sa atong lawas ang coronavirus, mo build na siya another immune system sa tua nga kabalo na sila mo unsaon pag-approach, unsaon pag-assess ug unsaon pag-ilang nga kining siya nga virus nga nipasok sa atong lawas or sa atong sistema is the coronavirus and how they are going to kill it. Mao na siya. Okay, mao na ang ambot pasabot sa coping capacity. No, mao na ang study karon nga gina-compare nila ang how fast the recovery of the person nga wala nakadawat og vaccination and how fast the recovery of the person nga nakadawat og vaccination. Diha makita ang coping capacity. So hazard, exposure, and vulnerability, such as physical, socioeconomic, are directly proportional to risk. And coping capacity is inversely proportional to risk. Diba? Meaning inversely kabaliktaran ng risk ang coping capacity. Hence, the more intense or severe the hazard and or the more vulnerable and exposed the elements are to the hazard, the greater the risk. Diba? The more nga ma-expose ka sa COVID, the more nga ma-expose ka sa mga crowded area or sa crowd mismo or to other people nga wala ka kaila kung kinsa ilang mga nakahalubilo for this past few days, the more nga dako ang risk nimo nga ma-infect ka. Mao na siya. Now, the more and greater is the coping capacity of the individual or community, the less the disaster risk. Now, the more nga mosunod ta sa protocol nato, health protocol nato, that we need to wear face mask, face shield, always bring an alcohol with you, do not go out of your house, of your homes kung unnecessary naman imong lakaw, stay away with other people, no, and get vaccinated, then the less the disaster risk. Diba? Mas mapababa nato ang infection rate. Disaster risk reduction or DRR is simply reducing the severity or intensity of the hazard and or reducing the vulnerability and exposure of the elements of the hazard, and in increasing the coping capacity of the individual or community to the disaster risk. See that? Muna to akong giingon kaganina. No? Risk may be classified as low, medium, or high, depending upon or based on hazard and vulnerability assessments. Disaster damage and casualty may likewise be classified as the above. So before we go to anatomy of disaster, evolution, and risk analysis, we are going to discuss this one the next meeting na because we have less than 10 minutes na lang nga nabilin. 'Di ba? Di ko gusto nga kana